In ancient Egypt, life doesn't end with death. In fact, the ancient Egyptians believed that death was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey, a journey that could end with salvation or annihilation. Ani hopes his Book of the Dead will bring him to a life in paradise. But he has many tests yet to come, and anything can happen. If the wandering soul follows the directions in the scroll, he eventually finds his way to a final challenge, the Hall of Judgment. Here he must face 42 separate gods in front of 42 separate doors. In front of each god, he must deny having committed a particular sin. It is one of the greatest challenges of the afterlife.
If you don't know the correct answers, the correct thing to say at this point, you presumably are not going to be able to get through that gate and pass successfully into the next life.
These 42 commandments that Ani must deny having broken have come to be called the negative confessions.
It's a litany of things that the deceased didn't do. So he says, I did not go out and murder anybody. I didn't steal anything. I didn't fool around with somebody's wife. I didn't do this, that, and the other thing. It's very informative and revealing about what probably a lot of Egyptians did do.
But chances are, only through the spells in the Book of the Dead would you make it through the negative confessions.
One should not confuse this with the notion of confession and repentance. This is really a magical incantation to wipe the board clean of whatever you might have done on earth.
One interesting fact is that most of the 10 Commandments can be found in the negative confessions. Could the 10 Commandments, written several hundred years after the Book of the Dead, be lifted from the negative confessions?
There's nothing in the Book of the Dead that says that there's only one God. There is nothing that says that only one God may be worshipped. However, almost all of the 10 Commandments, the things that are prohibited by the 10 Commandments, do appear in the Book of the Dead.
Egypt was the home of Moses. It's easy to see a variety of ways in which the Book of the Dead and Egyptian culture have influenced the Bible.
Whether or not the negative confessions are the source of the 10 Commandments, the Egyptians believed that a person must have lived a good life.
There are a lot of gods who would say, well, what did you do? And they would pose, it's almost like going through an exam. So they would pose test questions to the deceased to see if they had done right or wrong.
You have to open every gate. And these gates were not easy to enter. It was guarded with these huge scorpions, and you have to answer their questions or they will eat you.
The decisive moment in the Egyptian Book of the Dead is called the weighing of the heart.
The ancient Egyptians visualized many challenges waiting for them in the afterlife. One of the most important was to successfully undergo this judgment before the tribunal of Osiris and be found worthy to become one of the blessed dead.
The dead person's heart is the symbol of his intelligence and his emotions and even his mind.
The heart is, of course, where your essence lay and where your sort of good and bad deeds were.
The deceased must hand his heart scarab amulet to Anubis to be weighed against a single feather of the goddess Ma'at.
Ma'at was a goddess who is basically the personification of truth, justice, order, balance.
The heart could not be heavier than truth, but it couldn't be lighter either. It had to balance out. It's interesting that those phrases also continue to exist in our language. You talk about somebody being lighthearted or heavy-hearted.
No deceased wanted to be stuck just relying on their own purity of heart. Hence the Book of the Dead, with the appropriate magic spells that kind of make up the difference, help you get through by the skin of your teeth. But there is an option that you might not pass the test, and if you are not making good use of your Book of the Dead magic spells, you would be thrown to the monster, Amit. She is the devourer of souls, the devourer of the dead.
The job of this monstrous creature, which combined a crocodile, a lion, a hippopotamus, ferocious creatures like that, was to instantly devour any deceased person who was found guilty there in the Hall of Judgment.
If Amit eats your heart, you cease to exist. For the ancient Egyptians, that was the scariest thing. It wasn't punishment, it was not being able to exist at all.
The stone heart scarab, which represents the dead man's heart, is now put to the final test. A test for eternity or oblivion.
This was a spell that literally told the heart not to rat on you. So the spell was designed to keep the heart from saying, oh, by the way, you fooled around with somebody else's wife, or you stole something, or something like this. You were just supposed to say, no, you were just fine and dandy, no problems.
Some people have suggested that the heart scarab might have been a way to cheat one's way through the weighing. But I think that it represents more the concept that a person needs to be emotionally calm and ready for that to happen. You know, he needs to be one with his emotions, because the heart for the Egyptian was the seat of his emotions.
I think as long as we have human questions about the meaning of life and death, the Book of the Dead is actually going to remain quite relevant. The ancient Egyptians wrote that book not because they longed for death, but because they adored life and they wanted it to go on. The Book of the Dead imagines that the most blessed place you could be is right here on earth,